One of 6 siblings, Alaina Mercer grew up surrounded by her loving family.
Alaina and I shared a room for almost half my life.
I'd do their hair. My brother and I would play games with them.
Her father was a military man.
She was born 9 months to the date after I'd come back from a deployment.
Her mother, Lynn, was a nurse.
Mom worked the same shifts at Washington Hospital Center for years.
Other nurses looked up to her and came to her for advice on questions. She had such a big heart.
And she would go out of her way to help anyone, including Alaina's girlfriend, Christina.
Chris had a kind of difficult upbringing. She wasn't living in a stable home.
Mom, being that nurturer, that caretaker, she offered Christina a place to stay.
But was her generosity a dangerous mistake? One that would cost Lynn her life?
It was clear that she had been shot.
Suspicion immediately turned to Christina.
Christina, the whole entire time we were there, had almost a smirk on her face.
But did that mean she was the killer? Or did Alaina have a dark secret?
Alaina had a really bad fit, was committed again.
Mom tried to get Alaina the best care that she could.
And in the end, did a mother's love lead to an unthinkable betrayal?
I didn't want to believe it, but I knew it was true.
Spotsylvania County, Virginia, May 18, 2014. It was a quiet Sunday night in this peaceful suburban county halfway between Richmond and the nation's capital.
It's a bedroom community for both Washington, D.C. and Richmond. People who live here often commute one way or the other.
Spotsylvania County is very quiet, very safe place to live and raise your family and children.
And that would make what was coming even more frightening for the people who drove home to Spotsylvania every evening, normally leaving big city worries behind. It started at 11:30 that evening when co-workers of a Spotsylvania woman named Lynn Mercer called the sheriff's department.
On the evening of May 18, 2014, Lynn Mercer was scheduled to work at her job as a registered nurse in a hospital in Washington, D.C.
But Lynn hadn't come in that night.
It was very unusual for her to not show up to work on time or without calling to say that she would not be there or to be late.
Her coworkers called the Spotsylvania Sheriff's Office in order to have a welfare check conducted on her at her home.
Alerted by Lynn's coworkers, the department dispatched a deputy to Lynn's address on the western end of the county, well away from the I-95 corridor.
There's farmland out there, and several people have horse farms and cattle. This particular house was maybe a quarter of a mile off the hard road on a gravel road.
It's kind of remote area, which, the neighbors are far apart.
When the deputy arrived, Lynn's car was in the driveway. But was the 60-year-old nurse already in bed?
There were no lights on in the house. I knocked on the door, received no answer, didn't hear anything inside except dogs barking. There was no movement inside the house. No lights came on or anything.
Then, after knocking again, the deputy tried the door.
I actually reached down, grabbed the doorknob, turned it and pushed on it, and the door opened up.
But there was little that could prepare the deputy for what awaited him, because just inside the door, he found Lynn Mercer.
It was clear that she had been shot.
They could see visible trauma to the body, at least two bloody areas on her chest.
There had not been any struggle. It just appeared she had been ambushed.
Although assassinated might have been more accurate.
There were no signs of life.
The shooting left Lynn's quiet suburban community terrified.
You have a, middle-class white woman dead in her home. What happened? So there was a lot of questions surrounding this case in the community.
But was it a random crime, one that threatened the whole community? Or was there something evil lurking within Lynn's family?
And so we were very happy that Mom got married.
Together, Lynn and Bob would go on to have 4 more children. Although, since Bob was in the military, it wasn't entirely the end of Lynn's days raising her kids alone.
We got married, and 3 days later, I deployed to Turkey for a year.
And he would be in and out of the country regularly for the next 6 years, including 1988, the year that Alaina was born.
She was born at Walter Reed Hospital 9 months to the date after I'd come back from a deployment.
Although soon after, Alaina's father was promoted to a desk job that allowed the family to settle in suburban D.C.
We moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia, and she spent the majority of her childhood in that house.
It was a crowded house, too. Elise, the youngest of the six, was born 2.5 years after Alaina.
We always had a lot of family. My sister Alaina and I shared a room for almost half my life. As small children, we were pretty close.
In fact, the whole family was close, especially once Lynn went back to school to pursue her nursing degree.
We had to help out a lot, take the kids on walks. We would do things, I'd do their hair. My brother and I would play games with them, etc. So it was just part of being the oldest kids.
Fawned over by her older siblings, Alaina grew to be a beautiful little girl.
She had, that face of an angel. She was a very funny and sweet and adorable little girl.
And she was talented, too.
Alaina was, I'd say, gifted in terms of some of the arts. She sang very, very well. She played the piano.
She loved to dance. That was a big thing around the house. She enjoyed ballet.
But what Alaina loved most of all was an audience.
Early on, Lynn noticed that Alaina sought more attention than the other children and tried to be center of attention.
We were always in competition with each other. It was always a competition. Who could be better? With piano, it was, who could be better? Who could win more awards? With ballet, it was, who could do how many pirouettes? Or it was just a constant battle between us for the attention.
And for Alaina, one person's attention mattered more than anything else.
Alaina had to have Mom's complete and total absolute attention.
And she usually got it.
She knew how to pull at my mother's heartstrings and just make my mother bend at her every whim.
It was a talent that would come in handy once Alaina met 17-year-old Christina Brown in 2005. Born just 2 weeks after Alaina, Christina had grown up in Washington, D.C. But where Alaina's childhood had been filled with loving and supportive family, Christina's circumstances had been far different.
Chris had a kind of difficult upbringing. She wasn't living in a stable home. She didn't have the support that most young girls have.
In fact, most of the support Christina got wasn't from her family.
Christina was in foster care several times in the District of Columbia.
However, despite the differences in their backgrounds, the two teens bonded. In fact, they did more than that.
Alaina had fallen in love with Christina Brown.
The relationship took Alaina's parents by surprise.
She had flings with guys. When she was 16, that was the first boyfriend. There were a couple other ones that were very short-lived.
Alaina's mother, Lynn, was especially shocked to learn that her daughter had a girlfriend, but did her best to overcome it.
She was strict Catholic, but she thought she could help Christina, and she wanted to see Alaina happy, so she was accepting.
In fact, Lynn did more than just accept Alaina and Christina's relationship. When Christina turned 18 and aged out of foster care, Lynn welcomed Alaina's girlfriend into the family's home.
She needed a safe and reliable home. Mom, being that nurturer, that caretaker, offered Christina a place to stay.
And that wasn't all Lynn ended up doing for her daughter's girlfriend.
She had such a big heart. She wanted to help her better herself, helping her through college, giving her a car to drive, helping her financially, letting her live in her house.
Over the next few years, Christina lived with Alaina and the Mercers and took classes at a local community college.
They had their own bedroom, and they were being supported essentially by my wife.
Lynn catered to Alaina. She always was trying to make her happy.
Although even with her mother's acceptance and support, there was plenty of drama in Alaina's relationship with Christina.
They would break up and come back and break up and come back.
And in 2010, it looked as if their tempestuous 5-year relationship was finally over.
They broke up, and Alaina decided to go date guys again.
Alaina left Chris and basically stayed with a guy for 2 months until she was pregnant.
However, upon discovering that she was pregnant, Alaina realized that she didn't want to stay with the baby's father and came rushing back to Christina. The couple moved back in with Alaina's parents, and in November of 2010, Alaina gave birth to a daughter, much to her mother's delight.
My mother was preparing and caring for this baby, and I think that's when my mother honestly was the happiest.
It would only be temporary, though. Alaina, Christina, and the baby eventually moved out, got their own place in neighboring King George County, and started building a life for themselves.
Christina was employed by a rental car agency in King George, as well as a local hotel. She worked 2 different jobs.
And in 2012, the couple took another big step.
They were married in District of Columbia.
But even as Alaina settled down with Christina, trouble was coming. A horrifying crime that would take her mother's life and put her daughter's future in jeopardy. Coming up, is Alaina's mother the victim of a burglary gone bad?
It looked like somebody had gone through the house, looking for something.
Or was it an abduction?
One of my first thoughts when I saw the kids' toys was, where's the child?
Just before midnight on May 18, 2014, a sheriff's deputy conducting a routine welfare check discovered the body of Lynn Mercer, dead in her Spotsylvania County, Virginia home.
We found the victim laying on the living room floor with no signs of life. She had been shot.
But the 60-year-old nurse's dead body wasn't the only disturbing thing the first responders found.
The front living room had child toys around. One of my first thoughts when I saw the kids' toys was, where's the child?
The police frantically searched the house, hoping the child was merely hiding and not another victim.
Closets under the bed, anywhere a person could be. We went through the whole house like that until we were confident that the house was empty.
But did that mean that the child had been abducted? Or had Lynn's killers been after something else?
The house had been ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, clothing was laying everywhere. It looked like somebody had gone through the house, looking for something.
Was it possible Lynn inadvertently walked in on burglars while they were ransacking what they thought was an empty house?
Mom worked the same shifts at Washington Hospital Center for years. So she would go to work at 7, get home in the mornings.
And Lynn's husband, Bob, was temporarily living near his job just outside D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia.
Bob had just had back surgery, and he was living up north for convenience because he couldn't drive because of his back surgery.
So thinking the house was empty, it appeared that Lynn had come home from work on Saturday morning and walked into an ambush.
She was in her scrubs. All her belongings were around her. Looked like they just fell to the floor.
She had been shot a total of 4 times.
2 of the wounds were to her back.
One had passed through and her back and came out her chest, and the other one had gone through her lower torso and had passed through her legs.
That spun her around, and she fell on her back on the floor.
And then, while Lynn lay bleeding on the floor, the killer came closer.
The perpetrator came over top of her, fired 2 additional rounds into her upper torso.
However, despite 4 distinct bullet wounds in Lynn's body, the investigators could only find 3 shell casings at the crime scene.
And we tore the house apart looking for that last casing. We weren't able to find it.
Which made us to believe that the gun had possibly jammed after the last shot.
And the fact that one was missing wasn't the only unusual thing about the shell casings either.
Those shell casings were very specific. They're steel shell casings with red dots on the back.
In my 30 years, I've never run across them before.
In addition to the unusual steel shell casings, the investigators did recover all 4 of the bullets used in the crime. 2 were found in the living room.
1 bullet had lodged in a couch. We were able to recover that bullet. A second bullet was found in the corner.
And the 2 fired as the killer stood over Lynn had passed through her body, and into the floorboards beneath her.
One bullet had lodged in a floor joist, and a fourth bullet was found underneath the home on the ground.
Between them, the bullets in the casings could help the investigators identify the murder weapon.
The ballistics evidence from the scene was sent for analysis.
But whose hand had wielded the gun? The neighbors hadn't seen or heard anything.
This house is a very secluded. The nearest house was a couple hundred yards away. Most of the lots there are large lots, several acres in size.
The neighbors were all horrified by the news that Lynn was dead.
She was described as probably the perfect friend. Everybody loved her.
Well, almost everyone. According to the neighbors, there were two people that Lynn didn't get along with.
Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown's name came up immediately.
And the reason their names came up had to do with how Alaina and Christina had met in the first place. Although a precocious child, Alaina had also been temperamental.
Alaina was, once she turned around 4, very volatile, very easy to anger, very vindictive.
She would throw violent temper tantrums.
Alaina's parents put her in therapy, but their little girl's illness grew worse.
They essentially diagnosed her as bipolar. She was in and out of psychiatric hospitals.
Over the next several years, while Alaina's father worked hard to support the struggling family, Alaina's mother, Lynn, had done all that she could to support her daughter's battle with bipolar disorder.
She tried to get Alaina the best care that she could. She fought with insurance over and over and over to make sure that she could have stays long enough to address the issues. If this one hospital wasn't working well enough, she would fight to get her transferred to another hospital.
And in 2005, when Alaina was 17, Lynn had checked her into a special residential program for troubled teens.
Alaina had a really bad fit, was committed again.
And that was where Christina came into the picture.
Alaina and Chris had both suffered from mental illness and had both been institutionalized in a mental health facility. And that's where they met.
When they were discharged, Lynn had welcomed Alaina's girlfriend into her home.
Lynn tried everything she could to make that child happy.
Lynn provided them with food, paid the utilities. At that time, Alaina was drawing disability, Social Security, and Chris was working at a car wash. Together, they had an income of probably $1,800 a month. And that just isn't bad for a couple that's living with no outside expenses.
However, according to the family, Alaina and Christina had soon found something to spend their money on.
They were doing copious amounts of drugs.
They were using marijuana openly. They were using other drugs as well, but not just smoking weed.
And even with a baby to care for, Alaina and Christina's drug use had continued.
The baby was maybe 6 months, and I had come over with my 2 young children, and I walk in, and the house just reeks of marijuana. I'm like, Mom, what the heck? And Mom was like, I've told them to stop. I can't. What am I supposed to do? You know, and I was like, call the cops.
But Lynn, as always, hesitated to anger Alaina.
My sister honestly manipulated my mother and made her so fearful that she honestly probably felt like she had no choice.
And as the family explained to the investigators, Alaina's temper wasn't the only one Lynn had to consider. According to Alaina's father, Christina had a violent and criminal past.
She had been a drug runner for a drug ring in Washington, D.C.
Together, Christina's tough attitude and Alaina's volatile nature had Lynn increasingly on edge.
They were threatening her, telling her they were going to push her down the stairs. Their threats just became increasingly more violent.
And in June of 2012, the threats and intimidation escalated to the point that the police had gotten involved.
There was a big blow up at the house involving Christina and Miss Mercer and Melissa. There was a push and shoving match.
Chris got physical, and I called the police. Chris attacked me in front of the police officers, and The police had to drag Chris off of me.
Alaina's girlfriend spent the night in jail.
Christina actually wound up being arrested for domestic assault.
After the incident, Lynn finally found the strength to kick her daughter and Christina out of the house.
They were evicted for the safety of my mother.
Lynn also took out a restraining order against Alaina and Christina.
Lynn said she was scared to death of them.
After more than a year of tension and threats, Lynn was relieved to have Alaina and Christina out of the house. But she also worried that her granddaughter wasn't growing up in the best environment.
They would do sort of long-term rentals in hotels, stay at one place for a month, move, stay at another hotel for a month, live on someone's couch for a while, move to another hotel, all the while dragging this child along with them.
In August of 2012, concerned over the child's safety, Lynn went to court and filed for temporary custody of the 20-month-old.
Lynn saw this situation as dangerous for the child because of the way they were living.
And when Lynn's custody case went to court that November, the judge had agreed with Lynn.
She went to court and was able to obtain custody of her granddaughter.
It was only temporary until Alaina and Christina could get their lives in order.
They had to have an acceptable living situation for the child, and they had to be stable, overall stable.
Spurred on by the custody situation, Alaina and Christina had gotten married in October of 2012 and moved into an apartment in neighboring King George County.
The apartment they had was the first stable housing they had had in maybe years, and it was all part of their efforts to get custody of this grandchild back.
But would it be enough to convince the court? Or had they decided on a more direct approach? Coming up, Alaina appears surprised by news of her mother's death.
Alaina was visibly upset. She did go to her knees.
And the investigators uncover a crucial piece of evidence.
As soon as I looked down, I saw the red dot. There it is.
By mid-morning of May 19, 2014, it had been less than 24 hours since sheriff's deputies found 60-year-old Lynn Mercer murdered in her Spotsylvania County, Virginia home.
It appeared that Miss Mercer had been ambushed. The perpetrator stepped out and shot her down, and then stepped over and shot 2 more rounds into her upper torso.
Lynn's family believed that her 25-year-old daughter, Alaina, and Alaina's wife, Christina Brown, were behind the murder.
Lynn and Alaina and Christina had been locked in a long-running child custody battle over Alaina's daughter.
At first, it had appeared that Alaina might get her daughter back.
Christina and Alaina had tried to stabilize their living situation in order to help them succeed in the custody case.
But in April of 2014, a month before her mother's murder, Alaina's attempt to win custody of her 3-year-old daughter had suffered a serious setback.
In the days leading up to what was supposed to be the final custody hearing for these folks, Alaina was arrested for prostitution.
It was hard on the family, learning the lengths that Alaina would go to in order to feed her drug habit.
You always have a father's love for your children. At the same time, I'm looking at a person that I know is dysfunctional, entirely dysfunctional.
The judge agreed with her father's assessment too, and as a result, the custody hearing did not go well for Alaina.
Alaina lost the last circuit court appeal in April 2014, and Mom was killed in May of 2014.
That timing led the family to the horrifying conclusion that Alaina and Christina had killed Lynn in order to get Alaina's daughter back.
I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think possible that evil of them despite our troubles. But, it was true.
We knew it was Alaina and Chris was because of all the issues that had gone on.
Or was it possible that after so many years of dealing with Alaina's issues, that her family was jumping to conclusions? On the morning of May 19th, Spotsylvania County sheriffs knocked on the door of Alaina and Christina's apartment in neighboring King George County.
We're plainclothes detectives, so we requested a uniformed deputy to respond with us. We were greeted by Christina, and welcomed into the home.
And what they saw inside solved at least one mystery.
The detectives found that the child was okay and unharmed.
The child is happy, healthy, running around the house.
And according to Alaina, they'd had her since Lynn went to work on Friday night.
They had visitations with her from Saturday until Monday morning at 10.
In fact, Alaina said that when the investigators knocked on her door, she had been in the process of gathering her daughter's things.
Alaina was supposed to be meeting back with her mother to return the child.
Contrary to what her family believed, was it possible Alaina didn't know?
We, at that time, proceeded to sit down at the table and tell Alaina that her mother had been killed. Alaina was visibly upset. She did go to her knees. She made the sounds of somebody that was crying.
But Christina had a very different reaction.
People certainly handle information like this different. But Christina, the whole entire time we were there, had almost a smirk on her face.
Suspicious of Christina, the investigators asked if she or Alaina had been anywhere near Lynn's house in the last few days.
The last time Alaina and Christine said that they were there was in 2012.
They hadn't even been there to pick up or drop off Alaina's 3-year-old.
The police station, just where all the exchanges were done.
They have video cameras there, so it would have been a safe place for her to drop her daughter off.
But if they hadn't been to Lynn's house, where had they been? Neither Alaina nor Christina hesitated to answer.
They said that they had been home watching her child, watching movies, and they had gone up to D.C. to Christina's family the following day, roughly in the morning. So they basically had each other as an alibi.
Alibis that they were able to back up, too.
Sitting on the kitchen table, there was a stack of receipts, places that they had gone the day in question. And they had the dates and the times on them that they provided to us.
They even allowed the investigators to look through their cell phones.
Their phones were clean. There weren't very many messages. There weren't any pictures.
And there was that strange smirk on Christina's face when the investigators told her that Lynn was dead.
It was an unusual reaction given that Lynn was basically the mother to both of these girls.
And that left the investigators wondering if they could provoke Christina into a more telling reaction.
We asked Alaina and Christina to come in to the sheriff's office to take a polygraph.
Both Alaina and Christina agreed.
They were cooperative throughout the whole process.
But did that mean Christina had nothing to hide? Hoping to make her sweat a little, the investigators had Alaina take the polygraph first.
I wasn't part of the interview, but we get to watch the interview.
And what they saw validated all the Mercer family's suspicions.
The polygrapher was looking through the two-way mirror, and you could tell from his eyes, he's like, geez.
Apparently, the test wasn't going well for Alaina.
She showed deception in the polygraph process.
And after Alaina failed the test, Christina refused to take it.
She said it for everybody to hear it. She goes, well, if she failed, I'm going to fail.
The failed polygraph wasn't enough for an arrest, and they had to release both women.
A polygraph cannot be used against them in a court process.
We all gathered back up in the office after that, and the polygrapher looked at me and goes, you're on the right track. Just got to keep pushing.
Alaina wasn't under arrest, but despite her mother's death, she wouldn't get to keep her daughter either.
We filed an emergency custody hearing. I had to go and face my sister and Christina and essentially take custody of their child from them.
And considering the circumstances, it was a terrifying experience.
My sister, she was very angry. She told me, you will not get away with this. Immediately after the custody hearing, I went and filed a restraining order, which of course is only good for, a couple days.
Although before those few days were up, the investigators would get the break they needed. It started when a man from neighboring King George County called the Spotsylvania Crime Stoppers line.
We had a tip that came in from somebody in King George that sold Christina and Alaina a gun.
According to the seller, the weapon was a 9mm pistol, the same caliber as the gun that killed Lynn. But that wasn't the only thing he told the investigators about the gun.
The gentleman who sold the gun said there was a problem with the weapon, that he could never fire more than 4 shots through it consecutively without causing the gun to jam. He said if you fired that weapon 4 times, you would leave 4 bullets wherever you were shooting, 3 shell casings on the ground, and you would have a shell casing jammed in the gun when you left. Exactly consistent with the evidence in this case.
And thanks to the seller, the investigators might be able to prove that the gun he'd sold Alaina and Christina was the same one that killed Alaina's mother.
He told them that before he sold them the gun, he actually took the gun out in his backyard and test fired it. And from that, they were able to pick up casings.
And the casings weren't brass, they were steel.
As soon as I looked down, I saw the red dot. There it is.
We matched those cartridge cases back to the cartridge cases found at the scene.
Just to be sure, they sent the casings from the crime scene and the test firing to the state crime lab for ballistics testing.
The firearms section was able to compare those 2 sets of cartridge cases and conclude that they were fired from the same weapon.
And when the results came back on May 30th, the investigators went back to Alaina and Christina's apartment with an arrest warrant.
We went out there in full force to find them.
But Alaina and Christina were gone, and they had apparently left in a hurry.
The door was actually open. Keys, their phones, and everything were sitting on the table. So, well, they're close. They're somewhere close.
We feel that somebody must have alerted them when we turned into the subdivision.
And after 2 hours of door knocking, the investigators finally found the fugitives, hiding in a friend's house nearby.
Started getting a lot of finger pointing. That's where they were. When I confronted the homeowner, he basically opened the door. He said, "Y'all come on out." And when they did, we took them into custody.
Coming up, will Alaina finally reveal the truth?
She broke down and cried and told us what Christina had done.
Or is she lying to protect herself?
Christina told a story that was very similar except for one important detail.
On May 30th, 2014, Spotsylvania County, Virginia Sheriff's investigators placed Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown under arrest for murder.
I heard they had ran from their apartment into another and apparently were hiding underneath the bed like the cowards they are.
The 2 25-year-olds were suspects in the murder of Alaina's mother, 60-year-old Lynn Mercer.
Lynn Mercer had previously obtained custody of her granddaughter, which was Alaina's daughter.
Once in custody, both Alaina and Christina refused to answer any more questions.
They both lawyered up, so there was no further speaking with them.
Indicted for murder, they were held without bond at the Spotsylvania County Jail.
They sat in jail for over 1.5 years.
We were able to keep them apart the best that we could, being at the same facility, but it was important for us to be able to keep them apart.
Not only to keep Alaina and Christina from colluding on a story, but also to drive a wedge between the couple, which, as the weeks and months wore on, appeared to be working.
We had information that Alaina had several relationships with other females in the jail and that Christina was upset about it.
But would it be enough to turn Christina and Alaina against one another? As they prepped for trial, the prosecutors hoped that was the case.
Despite all the investigation that went on in this case, there was always one concern, and that was that we were never able to place any one person as the trigger woman in the case.
Technically, the prosecutors didn't have to prove whether Alaina or Christina had pulled the trigger.
We specifically charged that they were either acting in concert with each other or that they each planned and took steps in furtherance of this in advance.
And the prosecutors were confident they could prove that much.
We were able to make a really compelling case because the forensics matched up so that we put the weapon that did the murder in the hands of the people who are alleged to have committed it.
But would that be enough for the jury? The prosecutor wasn't sure.
I spoke with the defense attorneys and I told them, look, my case is strong, but it could be stronger. I would like to know who the trigger woman is, and I will be happy to receive whichever one of you gets to my office first to tell me what happened.
Would it work? No promises were made, no deals offered.
Alaina's attorney approached us and said she wanted to speak to us.
Detective Short and I went and met with her at the local jail. We spoke with Alaina at length about what had happened.
And over the course of her statement, Alaina not only tried to explain just what had happened, she also pointed out just who was to blame.
She broke down and cried and told us what Christina had done.
Alaina said that in the time leading up to April of 2014, Christina had become frustrated with the ongoing custody case and started to voice threatening language towards Lynn.
Threats that Christina had eventually turned to reality, according to Alaina.
Alaina told us that Christina had made elaborate plans regarding killing Lynn.
She went into a few details that kind of matched up what we had on the crime scene.
Alaina knew the details, but she also said that she had tried to talk Christina out of killing her mother.
Alaina told us that she was initially not okay with the plan to kill her mother.
However, she claimed that her tougher, streetwise wife had eventually bullied her into going along.
It was always a dominant, submissive relationship. Chris was the dominant. Alaina was very, very submissive to her.
Although as far as her part in the plan went, Alaina said that on the day of the murder, all she did was stay with her daughter and establish Christina's alibi.
She executed the plan to hold both of their phones so that it appeared that they were both in King George County.
Everything else, according to Alaina, was Christina's doing.
Alaina said that Christina went out, was gone for an appropriate amount of time, and came back and just said, it's done. I watched her take her last breath.
But was it the truth? Once Alaina came forward, the prosecutor's office immediately passed that information along to Christina's attorney.
Immediately, Christina's lawyer said, hey, she wants to talk.
Christina and her attorney also spoke with Detective Short. During that debriefing, Christina told a story that was very similar to what Alaina had said, except for one important detail, which was that Alaina was the person who went and shot her own mother.
She said she woke up one day, Alaina wasn't there, and when she came home, she said it was done.
Other than the name of the shooter, the two stories were almost identical. Although Christina did add one new piece to the puzzle, what had become of the gun?
Christina's version of it was Alaina that came in and told her that she had tossed the gun.
Could the police finally recover the murder weapon?
We basically launched a huge search along 301, walking for about 8.5 miles side by side, looking for anything. And we did that within 10 hours of talking to Christina, and we didn't find anything.
The weapon was never located during our investigation.
Which meant that despite two confessions, the prosecutors were right back where they started. Coming up, tensions explode in the courtroom.
I said, you both deserve a special place in hell.
But will Alaina get the last word?
The people in the courtroom were horrified.
On June 2, 2016, Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown stood in a Spotsylvania County, Virginia courtroom. The two 27-year-olds had spent the last 2 years in jail, awaiting trial for the murder of Lynn Mercer, Alaina's mother, over the custody of Alaina's daughter.
Frustration in the custody case ultimately became the seed that grew into the plot to kill Lynn Mercer.
However, the prosecution couldn't prove whether it was Alaina or Christina who actually pulled the trigger.
They both implicated each other. There was no single piece of evidence that tipped me one way or the other as to who actually was the shooter.
And ultimately, no one would ever know, because Alaina and Christina weren't in court to stand trial.
After consulting with the family, we made them a plea offer in the case.
The charge was first-degree murder, accessory before the fact.
Both Alaina and Christina took the deal.
They admitted to having involvement, whether it was covering it up or actually plotting it, the purchase of the weapon.
And as far as the prosecutors were concerned, that was good enough.
As long as we had a life sentence on the table, I would be able to argue sufficiently to get a sentence that was appropriate for them.
But what was appropriate? Alaina's father didn't hold back when he spoke at the sentencing hearing.
I said, I know that you are my child. I hope that they give you a life sentence from this crime.
And Alaina's half-sister Melissa agreed.
I want them to rot in jail. Whoever pulled the trigger, I don't care. They both planned it. They're both equally responsible.
Although for Alaina's younger sister Elise, even life in prison wasn't enough.
I said, only God and law can judge you, and you both deserve a special place in hell.
When it was their turn to speak, Christina chose to remain silent, but not Alaina.
My sister had some long, drawn-out statement, how it is all my family's fault, and that she is simply the product of being raised in mental institutions.
The people in the courtroom were horrified.
Including the judge, who sentenced both Alaina and Christina to 60 years in prison.
They're not going to get out of prison until they're in their late 70s, if they get out at all.
And according to her sister, it's what Alaina deserves, not only for what she did to her mother, but for what she did to her daughter, too.
I had to tell her, well, baby, Grandma still loves you, but she can't come see you. And then I had to deal with the question, well, why isn't my mommy coming to pick me up?
The unthinkable betrayal. A mother's love, a daughter's dark secret. Prologue, a mother's unwavering heart. The human heart, in its purest form, often extends outward in acts of selfless generosity, particularly within the sanctity of family. Lynn Mercer possessed such a heart, a vast and accommodating space brimming with a love that transcended conventional boundaries. She was, as the testimony would later reveal, a woman of formidable character yet tender spirit, a registered nurse whose compassion in the sterile corridors of Washington Hospital Center mirrored her boundless care within the warm embrace of her home. It was in this latter sphere, among her 6 beloved children and their ever-expanding orbits, that Lynn's true essence shone most brightly. Alaina, one of the 6, occupied a particularly poignant place in Lynn's affections. Born 9 months to the day after her father's return from a military deployment, Alaina arrived into a bustling household that already celebrated 2 older siblings from Lynn's first marriage. The rhythm of family life for the Mercers was one of constant motion, of shared responsibilities, and of enduring affection. Alaina and her sister, Melissa, were constant companions, their bond cemented by the simple intimacy of sharing a room for almost half their lives. Melissa recounted these formative years with a wistful warmth, recalling the quiet moments of tending to their younger siblings' hair, transforming mundane tasks into playful games, an enduring testament to the supportive environment Lynn painstakingly cultivated. It painted a picture of a typical, loving American family, the kind that forms the very bedrock of a peaceful community, making the dark currents that would eventually rise to the surface all the more shocking. Lynn's professional life was as steadfast as her personal one. For years, she anchored herself at Washington Hospital Center, her tenure a testament to her dedication and expertise. She was not merely a colleague, but a mentor, a pillar of wisdom upon whom other nurses leaned for counsel and answers. This innate capacity for nurture extended beyond bloodlines, a trait that would paradoxically pave the way for a tragic chain of events. Her expansive heart found another recipient in Christina, Alaina's girlfriend. Christina's backstory hinted at a stark contrast to Alaina's cushioned upbringing, marked by instability and the absence of a stable home. Lynn, ever the nurturer, the caretaker, saw a soul in need and without hesitation, extended an invitation for Christina to find solace and security under her roof. But was this expansive generosity, this instinct to shelter and heal, a perilous misjudgment? A fatal misstep that would tragically lead to Lynn's undoing? The grim reality would soon assert itself, painting a chilling portrait of violence. Lynn Mercer, the gentle nurse, the loving mother, the pillar of her community, was found shot. The revelation would send shockwaves, twisting initial suspicions toward Christina, whose unsettling composure during the immediate aftermath, described by an observer as almost a smirk, only intensified the scrutiny. Yet, as with all complex human dramas, appearances can be deceiving. Did that unsettling facial expression unequivocally mark her as a killer? Or did Alaina, Lynn's own daughter, harbor a darker, more intricate secret, one shrouded in the tumultuous history of her own deeply troubled past? The threads of Alaina's struggles, specifically her really bad fit and repeated commitment, suggested a fragile psyche, one Lynn tirelessly strove to mend with the best care that she could. This profound maternal devotion, this relentless pursuit of her daughter's well-being, now loomed large, begging the most agonizing question: could a mother's fierce, unconditional love ultimately lead to an unspeakable betrayal, orchestrated by the very child she sought to protect? The raw, gut-wrenching admission from a family member, "I didn't want to believe it, but it was true," foreshadowed a revelation of heart-shattering proportions. Chapter 1. The Quiet Night Shattered. Spotsylvania County, Virginia. The very name evokes images of historical reverence, pastoral beauty, and the quiet dignity of a well-established community. It sits halfway between the monumental grandeur of Richmond and the vibrant pulse of the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. A serene bedroom community where residents often embrace the dual identities of suburban calm and metropolitan ambition. Life here, particularly on a quiet Sunday evening, typically flowed with a predictable, comforting rhythm. People drove home, leaving the bustling anxieties of big city life firmly in their rear-view mirrors, exchanging traffic for tranquility, concrete for constellations. Spotsylvania was, by reputation and lived experience, a very quiet, very safe place to reside, to lay roots, and to raise a family. And it was precisely this deeply ingrained sense of security that would amplify the terror of what was to come, a chilling rupture in the peaceful fabric of May 18th, 2014. The hands of the clock were approaching 11:30, that evening when the initial, innocuous-sounding alert broke through the calm. It wasn't a distress call, not yet. It was a welfare check request, originating from the co-workers of a woman named Lynn Mercer. Lynn, a dedicated registered nurse, was scheduled to work a shift at a hospital in Washington, D.C. that night. However, she had failed to appear. Such an absence was profoundly uncharacteristic for Lynn. Her colleagues, intimately familiar with her impeccable work ethic and sense of responsibility, knew that for Lynn to miss a shift, let alone fail to call in to explain her absence or tardiness, signaled something gravely amiss. Their concern, rooted in years of shared professional camaraderie and respect, prompted them to reach out to the Spotsylvania Sheriff's Office. They simply wanted to ensure Lynn was well. The department, receiving the unusual call, dispatched a deputy to Lynn's residential address. Her home was situated on the western end of the county, nestled comfortably away from the bustling Interstate 95 corridor, a thoroughfare often synonymous with ceaseless motion and urban sprawl. Here, the landscape transitioned, giving way to rolling farmland, punctuated by picturesque horse and cattle farms, a quintessential Virginian rural idyll. This particular residence, further emphasizing its seclusion, lay approximately a quarter of a mile off the main hard road, accessible only via a winding gravel path. The area was, in every sense of the word, remote, with neighbors spaced comfortably, perhaps even generously, hundreds of yards apart. This meant fewer casual observations, fewer impromptu check-ins. creating an environment where a silent tragedy could unfold largely unnoticed. The deputy's patrol vehicle crunched to a halt in the Mercer driveway. Lynn's car was present, a seemingly reassuring detail. Perhaps, the deputy mused, the 60-year-old nurse was merely enjoying a well-deserved deep sleep, blissfully unaware of her co-workers' fretful calls. Yet, the house offered no immediate comfort. A shroud of darkness enveloped it. No lights illuminated the windows, casting the residents in an almost sepulchral gloom. The deputy approached the front door, the heavy silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. He rapped firmly on the door, then again. Silence was his only reply, save for the distinct, though muffled, sound of dogs barking from within. There was no movement, no flick of a light switch, no creak of footsteps responding to the summons. A chill began to settle in the night air, mirroring the growing unease in the deputy's chest. After knocking once more, a final, hopeful attempt to elicit a response, the deputy made a decision born of protocol and growing concern. He reached for the doorknob. His fingers closed around the cold metal, turned it, and with a gentle push, the door yielded. It opened inward, silently, without resistance, into the inky blackness beyond. But the vast training, the countless hours of preparation, the grim scenarios rehearsed and analyzed, could not fully prepare the deputy for the scene that now awaited him. For just inside the threshold, in the silent, darkened living room, lay Lynn Mercer. It was immediately, horrifically clear she had been shot. The visible trauma to her body was stark, sickening. At least 2 crimson-stained areas marred her chest, silent testament to a violent end. The scene offered no evidence of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no signs of a desperate fight for survival. It appeared, chillingly, as though she had been ambushed, a sudden, brutal assault from which she had no chance to defend herself. One might even describe the act as an assassination, a cold, premeditated strike against a vulnerable target. There were no signs of life, only the terrible stillness that follows such violence. The shooting left Lynn's quiet suburban community, and indeed all who heard of it, utterly terrified. The questions hung heavy in the air, echoing collective disbelief. You have a, middle-class white woman dead at her home. What happened? This wasn't the kind of tragedy that visited Spotsylvania County. It belonged to the big cities, the news reports of distant, anonymous violence. But now it was here within their peaceful confines. The community wrestled with a multitude of questions, grappling with the profound sense of vulnerability this act had inflicted. Was it a random crime, a senseless act of violence by an unknown intruder, threatening the security of everyone in their homes? Or, far more sinister, was there an evil presence lurking not in the shadows outside, but within the very fabric of Lynn's own family? The answer, as the layers of this tragic story began to peel away, would prove far more unsettling than any random act of violence could suggest. Chapter 2, A Family's Tapestry, A Daughter's Unraveling. Lynn Mercer was a matriarch, the proud mother of 6 children, each thread adding richness and complexity to her family's vibrant tapestry. The 2 eldest, Melissa and her brother, sprang from Lynn's first marriage, their early years shaped by the distinct memory of their mother as a single parent. Melissa recalled profound impact of this period, stating, "She and my father were divorced when I was young, so most of my early memories are of Mom being single." This early experience of independent strength undoubtedly contributed to Lynn's resilient spirit and deep commitment to her children. It was during these formative years that Lynn encountered Bob Mercer, a meeting sparked by the amiable backdrop of a dinner party hosted by mutual friends. Bob's initial impression was immediate and strong. "I thought she was very attractive," he recounted, an observation that quickly blossomed into conversation and then into a burgeoning romance. Their connection solidified, and it wasn't long before Bob was introduced to Lynn's 2 young children. Their acceptance was swift and enthusiastic. We really liked him, and so we were very happy that Mom got married. This blending of families marked a new chapter, one of hope and expanded horizons. Together, Lynn and Bob would welcome 4 more children into the world, cementing their union and enlarging the lively Mercer household. Yet, Bob's military career, a noble calling of service, inevitably introduced periods of separation, echoing Lynn's earlier experiences of raising children with a robust degree of independence. We got married, and 3 days later, I deployed to Turkey for a year, Bob recalled, painting a picture of a commitment that often meant absence. His deployments were a recurring theme, spanning 6 years of their marriage, punctuating the domestic landscape with both joy and the challenges of a military family. One such significant year was 1988, the year Alaina was born. Her arrival at the venerable Walter Reed Hospital, precisely 9 months after Bob's return from a deployment, was a tender moment, a new life unfolding within the rhythm of military service and homecoming. Soon after, however, Bob's career shifted, a promotion to a desk job providing a welcome anchor for the family. They settled in suburban D.C., eventually making their home in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where Alaina spent the majority of her formative years. We moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia, and she spent the majority of her childhood in that house. It was a bustling, lively abode, particularly so after the birth of Elise, the youngest of the 6, a mere 2.5 years after Alaina. We always had a lot of family, Melissa affirmed, conjuring an image of shared laughter, squabbles, and the unique camaraderie of a large, close-knit family. Alaina and Melissa's bond, reinforced by sharing a room for almost half their lives, transcended mere sisterhood, evolving into a foundational childhood friendship. As small children, we were pretty close, Melissa recalled, a statement hinting at a youthful intimacy that would, tragically, be tested to its breaking point. Indeed, the entire family was closely intertwined, a closeness forged and strengthened, perhaps ironically, by Lynn's ambitious pursuit of her nursing degree. During this period, the older children naturally assumed greater responsibilities. A common dynamic in families where a parent juggles education and domestic life. We had to help out a lot and take the kids on walks. We would do things. They'd do their hair, my brother, and I would play games with them, etc. Melissa summarized, reflecting a childhood marked by both caregiving and companionship, a natural order within a loving household. Fawned over by her elder siblings, Alaina blossomed into a beautiful little girl, embodying an almost angelic innocence. She had that face of an angel, a family member reminisced. She was a very funny and sweet and adorable little girl. Her appeal wasn't merely superficial. Alaina possessed a vibrant inner world, expressed through various artistic talents. Alaina was, I'd say, gifted in terms of some of the arts. It was noted. She sang very, very well. She played the piano. She loved to dance. Ballet, in particular, became a prominent and joyful expression in the household. This array of gifts, however, was accompanied by a burgeoning desire that would soon define much of Alaina's early emotional landscape, a deep craving for an audience. Early on, Lynn, with her keen observational skills honed by both nursing and motherhood, detected a distinct quality in Alaina. She noticed that Alaina seeked more attention than the other children and tried to be sent over. Attention. This early indication of Alaina's pronounced need for the spotlight soon translated into a persistent pattern of rivalry. We were always in competition with each other, Melissa explained. It was always a competition. Who could be better? This competitive drive manifested across various spheres. With piano, it was who could be better, who could win more awards. With ballet, it was who would do how many pirouettes. Melissa summarized it succinctly as a constant battle between us for the attention. But for Alaina, there was one person's attention that truly mattered above all others. One source of validation she craved with almost singular intensity, her mother's. Alaina had to have Mom's complete and total absolute attention. It was revealed, and disturbingly, she usually got it. This isn't to say Lynn was overtly indulgent, but rather that Alaina possessed an uncanny ability, an almost instinctual talent for manipulation, particularly adept at tapping into her mother's boundless well of compassion. She knew how to pull at my mother's heartstrings and just make my mother bend at her every whim. It was a talent that, far from being an innocent childhood quirk, would evolve into a powerful tool, one that Alaina would wield with devastating effect, particularly when she met 17-year-old Christina Brown in 2005. Chapter 3: The Tempestuous Alliance. The year was 2005. Alaina Mercer, at 17 years of age, was on the cusp of adulthood, a period typically characterized by self-discovery and burgeoning relationships. It was then she met Christina Brown, also 17, born just 2 weeks after Alaina, in the bustling heart of Washington, D.C., while geographically close. The pathways of their early lives have been dramatically divergent, creating a stark contrast in their formative experiences. Alaina's childhood, as previously described, had been a tapestry of loving family, unwavering support, and the predictable rhythms of a stable home. Christina's circumstances, however, had been far more fraught, marked by a palpable lack of security and stability. Chris had a kind of difficult upbringing, the narrative revealed. She wasn't living in a stable home. She didn't have the support that most young girls have. This absence of foundational support meant that Christina often navigated her young life without the protective shield most children take for granted. Indeed, much of the support she received came not from familial warmth, but from the institutional structures designed to assist vulnerable youth. Christina had been in foster care on multiple occasions within the District of Columbia, a profoundly unsettling experience that often leaves indelible marks on a young psyche, fostering a sense of insecurity and, at times, a hardening resilience. Despite these disparate backgrounds, one steeped in familial comfort, the other buffeted by the uncertainties of the foster care system, the two teenagers found common ground, a powerful, magnetic bond formed between them, transcending their contrasting origins. More than mere friendship, it quickly deepened into something far more profound. Alaina had fallen in love with Christina Brown. This development took Alaina's parents, particularly her mother Lynn, by surprise. While Alaina had experienced flings with guys when she was 16 and a first boyfriend, followed by a couple other ones who were very short-lived, this romantic connection with Christina represented a new, unexpected facet of her daughter's identity. Lynn, a devout Catholic, initially grappled with this revelation. Her faith provided a framework of conventional morality, yet her maternal love, vast and encompassing, ultimately prevailed. She approached the situation not with judgment, but with characteristic empathy, seeing Christina not as an anomaly but as another soul in need. She was strict Catholic, but she thought she could help Christina, and she wanted to see Alaina happy, so she was accepting. This statement eloquently captures Lynn's internal conflict and ultimate triumph of love over societal or religious preconceptions. Her acceptance was not grudging, but an active, compassionate embrace. In fact, Lynn's acceptance extended far beyond mere tolerance. When Christina turned 18 and subsequently aged out of foster care, a poignant term signifying the moment a young person transitions from institutional support into the often harsh realities of independent living, Lynn, with her boundless nurturer's instinct, offered Christina a place within the Mercer home. She needed a safe and reliable home. Mom, being that nurturer, that caretaker, offered Christina a place to stay. It was an act of profound kindness, a gesture that spoke volumes about Lynn's character, offering not just shelter, but a sense of belonging and familial warmth that Christina had likely yearned for her entire life. Lynn's generosity did not end there. Her magnanimous spirit compelled her to do more than simply provide a roof over Christina's head. She had such a big heart. She wanted to help her better herself. The account highlighted, listing a litany of supports, helping her through college, giving her a car to drive, helping her financially, letting her live in her house. For the next several years, Christina was not merely a guest. She became an integrated, albeit transient, part of the Mercer household, taking classes at a local community college, supported entirely by Lynn's unwavering commitment. The Mercers essentially financed their existence, providing their own bedroom and fully sustaining the young couple. Lynn catered to Alaina. She always was trying to make her happy, underscoring the dynamic where Alaina's desires, often implicitly expressed through her relationship with Christina, drove Lynn's generous actions. However, even with Lynn's encompassing acceptance and robust support, the relationship between Alaina and Christina was far from placid. It was characterized by an inherent tempestuousness, a recurring cycle of reconciliation and rupture. They would break up and come back and break up and come back, indicating a volatile, unstable foundation. This on-again, off-again dynamic seemed to finally culminate in a definitive separation in 2010. They broke up and Alaina decided to go date guys again, an apparent return to previous patterns. This brief detour led to a significant development. Alaina stayed with a guy for 2 months until she was pregnant. The discovery of her pregnancy, however, did not lead Alaina to a stable future with the child's father. Instead, it seemingly served as a catalyst for her to rush back to Christina, suggesting a complex emotional dependency that transcended simple romantic love. The couple, now anticipating parenthood, moved back into Alaina's parent home, another testament to Lynn's unending readiness to provide shelter and support. In November of 2010, Alaina gave birth to a daughter, an event that, despite the chaotic circumstances of its conception, brought immense delight to her mother. My mother was preparing and caring for this baby, and I think that's when my mother honestly was the happiest. This innocent life, this new grandchild, became a focal point for Lynn's nurturing spirit, bringing her profound, if temporary, joy. But this period of domestic stability, bathed in the glow of a new baby, was fleeting. Alaina, Christina, and the infant eventually sought their own independence, moving out of the Mercer home and establishing a residence in neighboring King George County. They began, ostensibly, to construct a life for themselves. Christina secured employment, demonstrating a semblance of responsibility, working 2 different jobs, one for a rental car agency and another at a local hotel. And in 2012, the couple took another significant step, formalizing their bond in a marriage ceremony held in the District of Columbia. Yet, even as Alaina and Christina endeavored to build a seemingly settled life, beneath the surface, darker currents were gathering force. A horrifying crime was brewing, a malevolent storm that would ultimately claim Lynn Mercer's life and cast a long, ominous shadow over her daughter's future. The stage was set for a tragedy that would strip away the veneer of normalcy, exposing the sinister secrets and toxic resentments that had festered within this troubled family. Dynamic. Chapter 4. The Discovery and the Deluge of Questions. Just before the stroke of midnight, on May 18th, 2014, the tranquil evening in Spotsylvania County was irreversibly shattered. A sheriff's deputy, dispatched for what was presumed to be a routine welfare check, made a gruesome discovery that would ignite a complex and deeply disturbing criminal investigation. Inside Lynn Mercer's home, the 60-year-old nurse lay dead, her life extinguished by an act of horrific violence. We found a victim laying on the living room floor with no signs of life. She had been shot. These laconic words from an officer's report encapsulate the grim reality that confronted first responders. The initial assessment of the scene painted a picture of calculated brutality. It appeared that Ms. Mercer had been ambushed. The perpetrator, hidden from view, had evidently taken Lynn by surprise. The sequence of events seemed chillingly clear. The perpetrator stepped out and shot her down, and then stepped over and shot 2 more rounds into her upper torso. This suggests a merciless, almost ritualistic finishing blow, delivered as Lynn lay incapacitated. However, Lynn's lifeless body was not the sole source of disquiet for the deputy and the rapidly assembling team of first responders and investigators. The very atmosphere of the front living room carried an unsettling detail. The presence of children's toys scattered around, hinting at an absent, vulnerable occupant. The front living room had child toys around. One of my first thoughts when I saw the kids' toys was, a child. The sudden, gut-wrenching realization that a child might be in danger sent a jolt of panic through the seasoned officers. The immediate, frantic search that ensued was fueled by desperate hope that the child was merely hiding, perhaps traumatized but safe, not another casualty of this senseless violence. Officers meticulously scoured every potential hiding place, closets, under the bed, anywhere a person could be, a methodical sweep of the entire residence. The search continued until the harrowing conclusion was reached. We went through the whole house like that until we were confident that the house was empty. With the immediate threat to a child seemingly averted, the focus shifted to deciphering the nature of the crime itself. Was a child abducted? Or, equally plausibly, had Lynn's killers been after something else entirely? The ransacked state of the house offered a tantalizing, yet potentially misleading clue. Jewelries were pulled out. Clothing was laying everywhere. It looked like somebody had gone through the house looking for something. This suggested a burglary, a home invasion gone terribly wrong. The investigators began to construct a timeline. Lynn's work schedule at Washington Hospital Center was well known. She worked the same shifts for years, typically arriving home in the mornings after her night duty. Adding another layer of complexity, Lynn's husband, Bob Mercer, was not at home. He was temporarily residing near his job just outside D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. Bob had just had back surgery, and he was living up north for convenience because he couldn't drive because of his back surgery. This detail meant Lynn was alone, a fact potentially exploited by an opportunistic intruder. The hypothesis began to solidify. Lynn, returning home from work on a Saturday morning, may have inadvertently stumbled upon burglars who believed the house to be empty. Her being in her scrubs when discovered, with all her belongings around her, suggesting they had just fallen to the floor, bolstered this theory. She had walked into an ambush, a violent confrontation she was wholly unprepared for. The forensics painted a stark picture of the brutality. Lynn had been shot a total of 4 times. 2 of these wounds were to her back. One bullet had passed through her back and came out her chest, while another had gone through her lower torso and had passed through her legs. These initial shots, delivered from behind, were likely intended to incapacitate her, to spin her around and cause her to fall on her back on the floor. The subsequent actions of the killer revealed a chilling depravity. As Lynn lay bleeding and vulnerable on the floor, the perpetrator approached, firing 2 additional rounds into her upper torso, a final, cold-blooded execution. However, even amid such clarity of violence, subtle anomalies began to surface, details that would ultimately challenge the initial, neat narrative of a burglary. Despite 4 distinct bullet wounds in Lynn's body, investigators could only account for 3 shell casings at the crime scene. We tore the house apart looking for that last case, and we weren't able to find it. This curious discrepancy led to an educated inference, which made us believe that the gun had possibly jammed after the last shot. This detail, seemingly minor, would prove profoundly significant. Moreover, the characteristics of the retrieved shell casings were unusually distinctive. The shell casings were very specific. There were steel shell casings with red dots on the back. This was not standard ammunition, a seasoned investigator noted. In my 30 years, I've never run across them before. This specificity offered a unique identifier, a forensic fingerprint that could potentially link the weapon to its owner. Beyond the casings, the investigators successfully recovered all 4 bullets used in the crime. 2 were found in the living room. 1 bullet had lodged in a couch, recovered intact, while a second bullet was found in a corner. The 2 bullets fired at close range, as the killer stood over Lynn, had penetrated her body and then impacted the floorboards beneath her. 1 bullet had lodged in a floor joist, and a 4th bullet was found underneath the home on the ground. Each piece of this ballistics puzzle, both casings and bullets, became invaluable, capable of being analyzed, and potentially matched to a specific murder weapon. The collected ballistics evidence was promptly dispatched for expert analysis, the hope being that it would unveil the identity of the gun's wielder. Yet, a vexing question lingered. Whose hand had wielded such a weapon with such cold efficiency? The secluded nature of the property had proven a double-edged sword for the investigators. This house is very secluded. The nearest house was a couple 100 yards away. Most of the lots. There are large lots, several acres in size. This rural privacy, once a luxury, now presented a significant investigative hurdle. The neighbors, those immediate sentinels of any unusual activity, hadn't seen or heard anything. The neighbors who did know Lynn spoke of her with universal adoration. She was described as probably the perfect friend. Everybody loved her. This portrait of a universally beloved figure made the brutality of her end all the more jarring. However, as is often the case in crime investigation, the cracks in an otherwise perfect facade begin to show. Well, almost everyone, an investigator intoned, implying a caveat. According to the same neighbors, there were indeed 2 individuals with whom Lynn shared a strained relationship, 2 names that surfaced almost immediately in hushed tones of suspicion: Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown. The reason for their inclusion in this grim tapestry of suspicion stemmed from the very beginnings of Alaina and Christina's unusual alliance. Chapter 5: A Daughter's Temper, a Mother's Struggle. Alaina Mercer, as recollections from her childhood revealed, had always been a complex and demanding individual. Beneath the angelic visage of a beautiful little girl lay a nascent volatility, a burgeoning emotional intensity that defied easy categorization. Alaina was one she turned around for very volatile, very easy to anger, very vindictive, an observer noted, tracing a distinct shift from youthful sweetness to a more troubled temperament. Her emotional outbursts were not merely typical childhood tantrums. They were severe, violent temper tantrums, signaling a deeper internal struggle. Lynn and Bob, as any loving parents would, recognized the gravity of Alaina's behavioral challenges and sought professional help. Alaina was placed in therapy, an attempt to navigate the turbulent currents within her young mind. However, instead of amelioration, her illness appeared to intensify. Eventually, specialists provided a diagnosis that shed a painful light on her struggles. They'd essentially diagnosed her as bipolar, this neurological condition, characterized by extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows. Depression explained the severe volatility. Her condition necessitated more intensive intervention, leading to a distressing cycle of institutionalization. She was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, a reality that speaks to the profound challenges faced by both Alaina and her parents. For years, Alaina's father, Bob, toiled relentlessly to provide financial stability for his struggling family, a commendable act of paternal dedication. Concurrently, Lynn, with her inexhaustible well of maternal devotion, engaged in a tireless, often emotionally draining battle to support her daughter's arduous journey with bipolar disorder. She tried to get Alaina the best care that she could, encompassing not just emotional support, but also navigating the bureaucratic labyrinth of healthcare. She fought with insurance over and over and over to make sure that she could have stayed long enough to address the issues. This highlights a profound financial and emotional burden placed upon Lynn. Her advocacy for Alaina was unceasing. If one hospital proved ineffective, she would fight to get her transferred to another hospital, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to finding solutions for her child's profound distress. It was in 2005, when Alaina was 17, that Lynn, in her continued quest for the best possible care, enrolled her daughter in a specialized residential program tailored for troubled teens. Alaina, during this period, was experiencing a severe psychological episode, described as a really bad fit. This acute crisis necessitated intervention, resulting in her being committed again. It was within the structured, therapeutic environment of this mental health facility that the pivotal connection between Alaina and Christina Brown was forged. Alaina and Chris had both suffered from mental illness and had both been institutionalized in a mental health facility, and that's where they met. This shared vulnerability, this common experience of grappling with internal demons within an institutional setting, served as a genesis of their complex and ultimately destructive relationship. Upon their discharge from the facility, Lynn, with her ever-open heart, extended her boundless generosity to Christina, welcoming Alaina's girlfriend into her home. Lynn's efforts to ensure Alaina's happiness were legendary within the family. Lynn tried everything she could to make that child happy, an observation that encapsulated her unwavering focus on her daughter's well-being. This extended to Christina, who now found herself ensconced in the Mercer household, receiving the kind of stability and support she had long been denied. Lynn provided food, paid the utilities, effectively subsidizing the lives of the two young women. At this juncture, Alaina was receiving disability, Social Security, while Christina was employed at a local car wash. Combined, their incomes totaled approximately $1,800 a month. While not a king's ransom, this income was not bad for a couple that's living with no outside expenses, suggesting a degree of financial ease due to Lynn's support. However, according to members of the family, this newfound financial flexibility was quickly diverted towards illicit pursuits. They were doing copious amounts of drugs. They were using marijuana openly. The language suggested a blatant disregard for household rules and a deepening descent into substance abuse. They were using other drugs as well, but not just milk and weed, hinting at a wider spectrum of illicit drug use, amplifying the growing concerns within the family. Disturbingly, their drug use persisted even after the birth of Alaina's daughter, signaling a dangerous detachment from their responsibilities as parents. A particularly harrowing incident occurred when the baby was around 6 months old. Melissa recounted visiting with her own young children, only to be confronted by a pervasive, unmistakable odor upon entering Alaina and Christina's living space. I walk in, and the house just reeks of marijuana. I'm like, Mom, what the heck? Her question, filled with dismay and alarm, was met with a weary, almost resigned response from Lynn. Mom was like, I've told them to stop. I can't. What am I supposed to do? Melissa's natural response, I was like, call the cops, reflected a clear understanding of the peril to the infant. Yet Lynn, perpetually caught in the gravitational pull of Alaina's manipulation, hesitated. My sister honestly manipulated my mother and made her so fearful that she honestly probably felt like she had no choice. This stark assessment reveals the extent of Alaina's psychological hold over Lynn, painting a portrait of a mother trapped in a vortex of fear and a daughter's emotional blackmail. Furthermore, the family confided in investigators that Lynn's apprehension was not solely directed at Alaina's volatile temper. Christina, too, carried a shadow of a violent and criminal past. According to Alaina's father, Bob, Christina had been a drug runner for a drug ring in Washington, D.C., a revelation that undoubtedly added a layer of grave concern for Lynn's safety and the stability of her home. The volatile combination of Christina's tough attitude and Alaina's volatile nature collectively subjected Lynn to an escalating campaign of intimidation. They were threatening her, telling her they were going to push her down the stairs. These were not idle, childish threats. They were increasingly aggressive and physically menacing. Their threats just became increasingly more violent, indicating a dangerous trajectory. The simmering tension finally boiled over in June of 2012, escalating to a critical point where law enforcement intervention became unavoidable. A big blow-up at the house involving Christina and Ms. Mercer and Melissa reached a violent climax. There was a push and shove in the match. Chris got physical, and I called the police. The situation rapidly devolved. Chris attacked me in front of the police officers, and the police had to drag Chris off of me. Melissa vividly recounted, painting a scene of uncontrolled aggression. Christina's actions resulted in her spending a night in jail, facing official charges for domestic assault. This incident, undeniably a tipping point, finally provided Lynn with the resolve to take decisive action. She found the strength to assert boundaries for the safety of herself and her household, effectively ending Alaina and Christina's residency. They were evicted for the safety of my mother, a necessary, albeit painful, decision, adding another layer of protection. Lynn secured a restraining order against both Alaina and Christina, acknowledging the real and present danger they posed. Lynn said she was scared to death, a poignant admission underscoring the depth of her fear and the emotional toll exacted by her daughter's destructive behavior. With Alaina and Christina out of the house, Lynn experienced a measure of relief from the year-long tension and escalating threats. Yet, her maternal anxieties were not fully assuaged. Her concern immediately pivoted to her granddaughter, the unstable, peripatetic existence led by Alaina and Christina, moving between long-term rentals and hotels. Stay at one place for a month, move, stay at another hotel for a month. Live on someone's couch for a while, move to another hotel, deeply worried Lynn. All the while dragging this child along with them. Lynn believed such an environment was fundamentally unsafe for the toddler. Driven by this profound concern for her grandchild's well-being, Lynn took a momentous step. In August of 2012, she filed for temporary custody of the then 20-month-old child. Lynn saw the situation as dangerous for the child because of the way they were living. When the custody case proceeded to court that November, Lynn's fervent concerns resonated with the judicial system. The judge concurred with Lynn's assessment. She went to court and was able to obtain custody of her granddaughter. This victory, however, was framed as temporary. Custody was granted until Alaina and Christina could demonstrate a capacity to bring stability to their lives, to establish an acceptable living situation for the child, and achieve overall stable conditions. This judicial directive provided a clear pathway for Alaina and Christina to regain custody, contingent upon tangible changes in their lifestyle and circumstances. Spurred by this pressing legal mandate, Alaina and Christina made moves that suggested a concerted effort towards compliance. They married in October 2012 and subsequently moved into an apartment in King, George County. The apartment they had was the first stable housing they had had in maybe years, a critical step towards fulfilling the court's requirements. This demonstrated effort was all part of their efforts to get custody of this grandchild back. But the chilling question remained. Would these ostensible efforts be sufficient to convince the court of their renewed suitability? Or, fueled by their deep-seated resentments and desperate desire for control, had Alaina and Christina decided to pursue a far more direct and ultimately deadly approach, one that sought to remove the primary obstacle to their ambitions, rather than genuinely address their profound instabilities? The answer, devastatingly, was not far off. Chapter 6, Shadows of Suspicion and the Smirk. The dawn of May 19, 2014, was a Monday morning, a time for renewed effort and routine after a quiet weekend. But for the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office, it marked the beginning of a grim new reality. Less than 24 hours had passed since deputies discovered Lynn Mercer's murdered body in her home. The peaceful facade of community had been irrevocably cracked. replaced by the chilling shadow of violent crime. Lynn's family, burdened by years of fraught history and volatile interactions, almost immediately honed in on Alaina, Lynn's 25-year-old daughter, and Alaina's wife, Christina Brown. Their shared convictions stem from the long, agonizing child custody battle over Alaina's daughter, a conflict that had devolved into an acrimonious struggle with profound emotional stakes. In the early stages, Alaina and Christina had presented a veneer of cooperation, striving to stabilize their living situation in a bid to bolster their chances in the ongoing custody case. They had secured an apartment, found jobs, and formalized their relationship with marriage, all steps designed to present a picture of domestic harmony and responsibility to the court. However, their efforts to reclaim Alaina's 3-year-old daughter suffered a crushing blow in April of 2014, merely a month before Lynn's brutal murder. Alaina was arrested for prostitution. This was not only a serious legal setback, but a profoundly painful revelation for the Mercer family, exposing the depths of Alaina's struggles with substance abuse and financial desperation. It was hard on the family, learning the lengths that Alaina would go to in order to feed her drug habit. Bob Mercer, Alaina's father, articulated his anguish and disillusionment with heart-wrenching honesty. You always have a father's love for your children. At the same time, I'm looking at a person that I know is dysfunctional, entirely dysfunctional. The judge overseeing the custody case unequivocally concurred with Bob's somber assessment of Alaina's functionality. The recent arrest, coupled with a history of instability, sealed Alaina's fate in the courtroom. Alaina lost the last Circuit Court appeal in April of 2014, a definitive end to her legal avenues for regaining custody. The timing for the family was tragically stark. Mom was killed in May of 2014. This close chronological proximity, coupled with the long, bitter history of conflict, led the Mercer family to a horrifying, almost inescapable conclusion. Alaina and Christina had orchestrated Lynn's murder as a desperate, malevolent act to regain custody of Alaina's daughter. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think possible that evil of them just played our troubles. But, it was true. A family member painfully confessed, reflecting the inner struggle against such an unspeakable thought, yet acknowledging the chilling congruence of events. We knew it was Alaina and Chris just because of all the issues that had gone on, highlighting the deep-seated understanding of their characters. Yet, from an objective, investigative standpoint, a crucial question hung in the air. After so many years of wrestling with Alaina's myriad issues, was the family, however understandably, jumping to conclusions? It was the investigator's solemn duty to approach the case with unbiased eyes, to seek concrete evidence beyond the emotional logic of a grief-stricken family. On the morning of May 19th, the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's plainclothes detectives, recognizing the sensitive nature of their visit, requested a uniformed deputy to accompany them. Their destination, Alaina and Christina's apartment in King George County. They were greeted by Christina and welcomed into the home, an ostensibly polite reception. What they encountered inside solved at least one immediate, pressing mystery. The detectives found that the child was okay and unharmed. The child is happy, healthy, running around the house. This sight provided a modicum of relief, assuring them the little girl, the innocent pawn in this escalating drama, was physically safe. According to Alaina, they had been caring for the child since Lynn went to work on Friday night, having had visitation rights from Saturday until Monday morning at 10. Indeed, Alaina claimed that when the investigators arrived, she had been in the process of preparing her daughter's belongings, as she was supposed to be meeting back with her mother to return the child. This narrative, if true, suggested Alaina had no knowledge of her mother's fate prior to the detectives' arrival, throwing a complex variable into the family's firm convictions. At the kitchen table, the detectives delivered the devastating news. We at that time proceeded to sit down at the table and tell Alaina that her mother had been killed. Alaina's reaction, under such grave circumstances, was critical. Alaina was visibly upset. She'd go to her knees. She made the sounds of somebody that was crying. It was a powerful, demonstrative display of grief, a seemingly genuine expression of sorrow from a daughter receiving the news of her mother's violent death. Christina's reaction, however, was strikingly, unnervingly different. While people indeed handle such horrific information with a wide spectrum of emotional responses, Christina's demeanor stood out in stark, unsettling contrast. Christina, the whole entire time we were there, had almost a smirk on her face. This disquieting expression, observed by seasoned law enforcement professionals, was deeply troubling. It hinted at an emotional disconnect, an almost perverse detachment from the gravity of the situation, making her a person of significant interest, if not outright suspicion, to the investigators. The detectives, now alert to these subtle behavioral cues, began their inquiries. Had either Alaina or Christina been anywhere near Lynn's house in recent days? Their response was swift and definitive. The last time Alaina and Christine said that they were there was in 2012. They even claimed they hadn't visited Lynn's home for child drop-offs or pickups. The police station is where all the exchanges were done. They had video cameras there, so it would have been a safe place for her to drop her daughter off. This detail served as a potential point of verification or refutation. If they hadn't been at Lynn's house, then where had they been? Alaina and Christina provided their alibis without hesitation. They claimed they had been home watching her child, watching Louise, and subsequently, on the following day, roughly in the morning, they had gone up to D.C. to Christina's family. This meant they effectively served as each other's alibi. Remarkably, they offered tangible evidence to support their claims. Sitting on the kitchen table, there was a stack of receipts, places that they had gone the day in question. These receipts, complete with dates and times, were handed over, seemingly providing documentary corroboration for their narrative. Further, they readily granted the investigators permission to inspect their cell phones. Here, too, the results were seemingly benign. Their phones were clean. There weren't very many messages. There weren't any pictures. The lack of incriminating digital evidence, coupled with their detailed alibi, presented a puzzle. Yet Christina's strange smirk, a deeply unsettling incongruity in the face of such tragedy, gnawed at the investigators. It was an atypical reaction, particularly given Lynn's profound role as a surrogate mother to Christina herself. The contrast between Alaina's demonstrative grief and Christina's almost smug composure was simply too stark to ignore. This behavioral anomaly fueled a tactical question. Could they provoke Christina into a more revealing, less controlled reaction? The investigators, employing a common psychological technique in such circumstances, proposed a polygraph examination. We asked Alaina and Christina to come into the sheriff's office to take a polygraph. To the detective's surprise, both Alaina and Christina agreed. They were cooperative throughout the whole process. This apparent willingness could be interpreted in multiple ways: genuine innocence, naive overconfidence, or a calculated gamble born of misguided belief in their ability to deceive. To add an element of psychological pressure and hoping to subtly unnerve Christina, the investigators arranged for Alaina to undergo the polygraph first. A detective, observing through a two-way mirror, vividly recalled the polygrapher's reactions. I wasn't part of the interview, but we get to watch the interview, and what they saw validated all the Mercer family's suspicions. The polygrapher's nonverbal cues were unmistakable. You could tell from his eyes, he's like, geez. It was a clear indication that the test was not going well for Alaina. The scientific assessment corroborated the subtle behavioral observations. She showed deception in the polygraph process. Following Alaina's failed polygraph, Christina's carefully constructed composure cracked. Her refusal to proceed with her own test was blunt and telling. She said for everybody here, she goes, well, if she failed, I'm going to fail. It was an implicit admission of complicity, an acknowledgement that her story much like Alaina's, contained a core deception. However, despite the incriminating nature of a failed polygraph and a subsequent refusal, these findings alone were legally insufficient for an immediate arrest. A polygraph cannot be used against them in a court process. Reluctantly, the detectives had to release both women. Yet, the intuition of the polygrapher offered a strong affirmation. We all gathered back up in the office after that, and the polygrapher looked at me and goes, "You're on the right track. She's got to keep pushing." It was a moral victory, a psychological arrow finding its mark, even if legal shackles remained elusive for a moment. Alaina, despite the deepening cloud of suspicion and her release, would not escape unscathed in other arenas. Despite her mother's death, she would not regain custody of her daughter. Melissa recounted the agonizing ordeal of an emergency custody hearing, where she had to confront her sister and Christina and essentially take custody of their child from them. The experience was terrifying. My sister, she was very angry. She told me, "You will not get away with this." The words, chillingly prophetic and laced with malevolent intent, underscored Alaina's volatile nature. Melissa, rightly fearing for her own safety after the threat, immediately filed for a restraining order, which of course is only good for, a couple days, she noted, highlighting the fragile and temporary nature of such protections. But even as the clock ticked down on that temporary protective order, the investigators were about to receive the critical breakthrough they desperately needed. Justice, though often slow, was beginning its relentless march. Chapter 7, The Red Dot and the Breakthrough. The fleeting days of Melissa's restraining order, while offering only temporary solace, proved to be a critical window of opportunity for the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office. A seismic shift in the investigation arrived courtesy of an anonymous tip channeled through the Crime Stoppers line. The call originated from neighboring King George County, and its content was nothing short of extraordinary. We had a tip that came in from somebody in King George that sold Christina and Alaina a gun. This single piece of information, if accurate, could be the linchpin that tied the two women directly to Lynn Mercer's murder. According to the informant, the weapon he had sold to Christina and Alaina was a 9mm pistol. This detail immediately resonated with the investigative team, as the ballistic evidence recovered from Lynn's home had indicated the use of a 9mm caliber weapon. But the informant's testimony extended beyond mere caliber. It included a crucial, almost idiosyncratic, detail about the weapon's operational flaw. The gentleman who sold the gun said there was a problem with the weapon, that he could never fire more than 4 shots through it consecutively without causing the gun to jam. This particularity, seemingly a minor defect, provided a chilling echo to a baffling forensic anomaly at the crime scene. He said if you fire that weapon 4 times, you would leave 4 bullets wherever you were shooting, 3 shell cases on the ground, and you would have a shell casing jammed in the gun when you left. This description was uncannily, precisely, and exactly consistent with the evidence in this case. The perplexing detail of only 3 shell casings being found at the scene despite 4 bullet wounds now made grim, undeniable sense. The missing 4th casing, the subject of an exhaustive and ultimately futile search within Lynn's home, was now accounted for. It was jammed within the murder weapon itself, carried away by the perpetrators. This congruence between a specific weapon defect and the unique crime scene forensics was a kind of investigative golden thread that rarely presents itself with such clarity. The informant's assistance didn't stop there. He provided another invaluable piece of information that could definitively link the gun to Lynn's murder before selling the weapon to Alaina and Christina. He had actually took the gun out in his backyard and test-fired it. From this test firing, he was able to pick up casings from his property. Crucially, these weren't conventional brass casings. And the casings weren't brass, they were steel. Even more specifically, these steel casings bore a unique visual marker. I said I looked down. I saw the red dot. There it is. This highly distinctive detail, the steel shell casings with red dots on the back, exactly matched the unusual ammunition discovered at Lynn Mercer's crime scene. The evidentiary chain was tightening with astonishing speed and precision. The investigators promptly arranged the retrieval of these crucial test-fired casings from the informant's backyard. These were then meticulously transported to the state crime laboratory, alongside the casings recovered from a crime scene, for definitive ballistics testing. The objective was simple: to confirm whether the unique markings on the spent cartridge cases from both locations matched, thereby proving they were ejected from the same weapon. The firearms section was able to compare those two sets of cartridge cases and conclude that they were fired from the same weapon. The results, when they returned on May 30th, provided an irrefutable scientific link between the specific firearms sold to Alaina and Christina and the murder weapon used to end Lynn Mercer's life. With this powerful, unambiguous ballistic evidence in hand, the investigative team now had sufficient probable cause to escalate their actions. The polygraph results, while inadmissible in court, had provided crucial guidance. The informant's tip had supplied the actionable, verifiable evidence. On May 30th, 2014, equipped with arrest warrants, the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office descended upon Alaina and Christina's apartment once more. This time, their approach was different. A decisive display of force, signaling an end to the charade. We went out there in full force to find them. However, the apartment was eerily silent, devoid of its occupants. It quickly became apparent that Alaina and Christina were gone, and their departure had been made in a hurried, almost panicked fashion. The door was actually open, keys, their phones, and everything was sitting on the table. This chaotic abandonment suggested a sudden flight, perhaps spurred by an untimely alert. Well, they're close. They're somewhere close. We feel that somebody must have alerted them when we turned into the subdivision. This pointed to an ongoing subtle cat-and-mouse game, perhaps with a local Confederate inadvertently or deliberately tipping them off to the approaching law enforcement. For 2 tense hours, officers meticulously canvassed the surrounding area, engaging in door-to-door inquiries, their vigilance undiminished. The diligent search eventually paid off. We started getting a lot of finger-pointing. The community's eyes, initially hesitant, now began to guide the police. The fugitives were ultimately discovered hiding in a friend's house nearby. The confrontation was brief and conclusive. When I confronted the homeowner, he basically opened the door. He said, "Y'all come on out." Alaina and Christina, their brief flight from justice now at an end, emerged from their hiding place. And when they did, we took them to the custody, officially placing them under arrest for the murder of Lynn Mercer. The net had finally closed. Chapter 8: Confessions, Contradictions, and the Missing Link. On May 30th, 2014, the tranquil evening hours of Spotsylvania County, Virginia, witnessed the formal apprehension of Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown. The two 25-year-olds were placed under arrest for the brutal murder of Lynn Mercer. Alaina's 60-year-old mother, Melissa, Lynn's other daughter, reflected with a mixture of grim satisfaction and unvarnished contempt on their capture. I heard they had ran from their apartment into another and apparently were hiding underneath the bed like the cowards they are. The image spoke volumes of their desperation and lack of fortitude in the face of imminent justice. Their motive, a cold, calculated desperation to reclaim Alaina's daughter, now seemed undeniable. Lynn Mercer had previously obtained custody of her granddaughter, which was Alaina's daughter. The frustration stemming from this custody battle had finally metastasized into an act of ultimate betrayal. Once in custody, however, the previously cooperative facade crumbled. Alaina and Christina, now facing the full weight of murder charges, swiftly asserted their legal rights. They both lawyered up, so there was no further speaking with them. This silence, while legally protected, posed an immediate challenge to the prosecution. To definitively prove which of the two women had actually pulled the trigger, They were both indicted for murder and held without bond at the Spotsylvania County Jail. The gravity of their alleged crime reflected in the stringent pretrial detention. They sat in jail for over a year and a half, a significant period of incarceration underscoring the legal complexities and resource demands of such a high-stakes case. A critical aspect of the jail strategy was to maintain a physical and psychological distance between the two co-defendants. We were able to keep them apart the best that we could, being at the same facility, but it was important for us to be able to keep them apart. This was not merely about preventing physical confrontation, but a shrewd tactical decision designed to prevent collusion on their stories. More importantly, it was an attempt to exploit the inherent fragilities of their toxic relationship, to drive a wedge between the couple. As the weeks stretched into months and the confines of incarceration wore down their resolve, this strategy began to yield dividends. We had information that Alaina had several relationships with other females in the jail and that Christina was upset about it. This suggested that the bond between them, seemingly solidified by shared crime, was eroding under the pressures of isolation and external influences. The question then became, would this calculated wedge be sufficient to turn Christina and Alaina against one another, compelling one or both to break their silence and confess? As the prosecutors meticulously prepared for trial, this became a pressing concern. Despite all the investigation that went on in this case, there was always one concern, and that was that we were never able to place any one person as the trigger woman in the case. This lack of direct evidence pinpointing the shooter posed a significant, though not insurmountable, obstacle. The legal framework, thankfully, offered an alternative path to justice. We specifically charged that they were either acting in concert with each other or that they each planned and took steps and further into this in advance. This meant that proving a conspiracy to commit murder or accessory to murder was just as viable as proving direct culpability as the shooter. The prosecutors remained confident in the strength of their case. We were able to make a really compelling case because the forensics matched up so that we put the weapon that did the murder in the hands of the people who are alleged to have committed it. The unique ballistics evidence, the distinctive steel casings with red dots, the specific jamming mechanism of the 9mm pistol was undeniably potent. Yet, a direct identification of the trigger person remained elusive, a detail that, while not legally necessary for a conviction, would undoubtedly bolster the emotional impact of their presentation to a jury. In a shrewd legal gambit, the prosecutor extended an offer, a calculated risk to break the deadlock. I spoke with the defense attorneys and I told them, look, my case is strong, but it could be stronger. I would like to know who the trigger woman is, and I will be happy to receive whichever one of you gets to my office first to tell me what happened. It was an open invitation to confess, to betray the other, offering no explicit promises of leniency, but hinting at the implicit advantage of cooperation. Would this audacious strategy work? No specific promises were made, and no deals offered, at least not up front. But the psychological seed had been planted. Alaina's attorney, seizing the opportunity, approached the prosecution with an unexpected declaration. His client was ready to speak. Detective Short, a lead investigator, recounted the pivotal meeting. Alaina's attorney approached us and said she wouldn't speak to us. Correction, the text says. Alaina's attorney approached us and said she wouldn't speak to us. Detective Short and I went and met with her at the local jail. This means a lawyer approached and stated Alaina would speak, or the lawyer indicated that Alaina, contrary to previous silence, was now willing. Let me adjust for logical flow. Assuming the intent was that Alaina would speak after previously refusing. Alaina's attorney approached us and said Alaina was now willing to speak. Detective Short and I went and met with her at the local jail. During their extensive conversation, we spoke with Alaina at length about what had happened. Over the course of her statement, Alaina embarked on a meticulously constructed narrative, not only recounting what she claimed transpired, but also meticulously pointing the finger of blame at Christina. She broke down and cried and told us what Christina had done. The tears, genuine or theatrical, served to amplify her narrative. Alaina asserted that in the months leading up to April 2014, Christina had grown increasingly exasperated with the protracted custody case. This frustration had then escalated into veiled and then overt threats against Lynn. According to Alaina, these threats eventually transformed into a horrific reality. Alaina told the investigators that Christina had made elaborate plans regarding killing Lynn. These plans were not abstract. She went into a few details that kind of matched up what we had on the crime scene. Alaina possessed insider knowledge of the murder's grim specifics. However, Alaina's confession was not an unvarnished admission of full culpability. Instead, she artfully cast herself as an unwilling participant, claiming she had vehemently tried to talk Christina out of killing her mother. Her initial stance, she maintained, was one of moral opposition. Alaina told us that she was initially not okay with the plan to kill her mother. Her subsequent involvement, she argued, was a product of coercion. She characterized their relationship as a dominant, submissive relationship, where Chris was the dominant, and Alaina was very, very submissive to her. This narrative, while self-serving, painted a picture of her being bullied into acquiescence. As for her direct role on the day of the murder, Alaina portrayed herself as an accessory rather than the primary actor. She claimed that all she did was remain with her daughter and meticulously construct Christina's alibi. She executed the plan to hold both of their phones so that it appeared that they were both in King, George County. This critical detail explained why their phones appeared clean and positioned them far from the Spotsylvania crime scene. Everything else, every brutal step of the actual murder, was, according to Alaina, Christina's doing. Alaina said that Christina went out, was gone for an appropriate amount of time, and came back and just said, "It's done. I watched her take her last breath." The final chilling detail, attributed to Christina, added a layer of cold-blooded observation to the alleged act, but was Alaina's tearful confession, so carefully calibrated to minimize her own role. The absolute truth? The prosecutor's office, operating with impartiality and strategic insight, promptly relayed Alaina's information to Christina's attorney. The reaction was almost instantaneous. Immediately, Christina's lawyer said, "Hey, she wants to talk." Christina and her attorney also met with Detective Short, eager to present her own version of events. During this debriefing, Christina recounted a story that was very similar to what Alaina had said. The core narrative, the planning, the motive, the method was largely consistent. There was, however, one critically important, profoundly divergent detail, which was that Alaina was a person who went and shot her own mother. Christina vehemently maintained that she woke up one day. Alaina wasn't there, and when she came home, she said it was done. Beyond the pivotal difference in who pulled the trigger, the two confessions, in their narrative structure and most details, were almost identical. Christina's account, however, did offer one valuable new piece to the puzzle, one that could potentially lead to tangible evidence. She disclosed what had become of the gun. Christina's version specified that Alaina that came in and told her that she had tossed the gun. This information, even if originating from a self-serving narrative, offered a last, desperate hope of recovering the elusive murder weapon. Acting swiftly on this fresh lead, law enforcement initiated an intensive search. We basically launched a huge search along 301, walking for about 8.5 miles, side by side, looking for anything. The methodical, exhaustive search involved considerable manpower and resources, a testament to the department's commitment to leaving no stone unturned. The search was conducted within 10 hours of talking Christina, underscoring the urgency. Despite these concerted efforts, the weapon remained elusive, and we didn't find anything. The weapon was never located during our investigation. This outcome meant that, despite 2 confessions, 2 detailed and largely consistent narratives, each implicating the other as the primary shooter. The prosecutors found themselves precisely back where they started concerning the trigger woman. The weapon, the definitive arbiter of who held it last, remained a silent, lost witness. The human tendency for self-preservation had led to conflicting accounts of the ultimate, culpability, leaving the true identity of the shooter shrouded in enduring ambiguity. Chapter 9. The Courtroom's Fury and the Unyielding Gavel. On June 2nd, 2016, the gravitas of a Spotsylvania County, Virginia courtroom descended upon Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown. The two 27-year-olds had endured over 2 agonizing years incarcerated. Their lives paused, awaiting trial for the brutal murder of Lynn Mercer, Alaina's mother. The central, tragic motive had crystallized, stark and undeniable: the bitter custody dispute over Alaina's daughter. Frustration in the custody case ultimately became the seed that grew into the plot to kill Lynn Mercer. This statement laid bare the horrifying progression from legal entanglement to lethal action. Despite the exhaustive investigative efforts and the recovery of crucial ballistic evidence, the prosecution faced a persistent challenge, proving beyond a reasonable doubt whether it was Alaina or Christina who had actually pulled the trigger. They both implicated each other. The narratives, though strikingly similar in their details of the planning and the aftermath, diverged precisely on the identity of the shooter. There was no single piece of evidence that tipped me one way or the other as to who actually was the shooter. This created an intractable ambiguity that, while not preventing conviction, certainly complicated the narrative. Ultimately, the courtroom would not witness a prolonged trial designed to ferret out the specific trigger woman. Instead, after intensive consultations with the heartbroken Mercer family, the prosecution presented a plea offer. After consulting with the family, we made them a plea offer in the case. The charge to which both women would eventually plead guilty was first-degree murder accessory. Before the fact, both Alaina and Christina took the deal. This plea meant they admitted to a significant level of involvement, acknowledging complicity in the crime. They admitted to having involvement, whether it was covering it up or actually plotting it, the purchase of the weapon. For the prosecution, this constituted a significant victory. As long as we had a life sentence on the table, I would be able to argue sufficiently to get a sentence that was appropriate for them. The overarching goal was to ensure these individuals, whose actions had so cruelly extinguished a life, would be held accountable with a commensurate period of incarceration. The pivotal moment arrived during the sentencing hearing, an opportunity for the victim's family to finally confront Alaina and Christina and express the devastating impact of their actions. Alaina's father, Bob Mercer, whose heart had been torn between paternal love and profound disappointment, delivered a statement of raw, unvarnished truth. His words, directed at his own child, were laced with a tragic blend of love and righteous indignation. I said, I know that you are my child. I hope that they give you a life sentence from this crime. It was an acknowledgement of their biological connection, inextricably bound with a desperate plea for justice commensurate with the magnitude of her betrayal. Melissa, Alaina's half-sister, echoed this sentiment, her anger and grief palpable. I want them to rot in jail. Whoever pulled the trigger, I don't care. They both planned it. They're both equally responsible. Her statement cut to the core of the prosecution's case, that whether by direct action or complicit planning, both women bore equal moral and legal responsibility for Lynn's murder. But for Elise, the youngest of the 6 siblings, Lynn's daughter, who shared a bedroom with Alaina for so long, even life in prison seemed insufficient retribution for such an unforgivable act. Her words, delivered with chilling conviction, spoke to a cosmic scale of justice. I said, only God and law can judge you, and you both deserve a special place in hell. It was a visceral articulation of an unfathomable grief and a profound sense of betrayal. When it was their turn to speak, to offer remorse or explanation. Christina chose to maintain a stony silence, perhaps adhering to legal counsel, perhaps simply devoid of words. Alaina, however, seized the opportunity. What followed was a stark illustration of her persistent psychological defense mechanisms, a deflection of accountability that left the courtroom aghast. My sister had some long, drawn-out statement, how it is all my family's fault, and that she is simply the product of being raised in mental institutions. This self-serving narrative, attributing blame entirely to external circumstances and her upbringing, denied any personal agency or culpability for her actions. The impact was immediate and profound. The people in the courtroom were horrified. A collective gasp of disbelief at such an audacious refusal to accept responsibility. The judge, witnessing this blatant evasion, delivered stern and unwavering judgment. Both Alaina and Christina were sentenced to 60 years in prison. The weight of this sentence was clear. They're not going to get out of prison until they're in their late 70s, if they get out at all. It was a pronouncement of a life effectively forfeited, a severe consequence for their heinous crime. According to Melissa, this severe sentence was not only justified for what Alaina and Christina did to Lynn, but also for the immeasurable harm inflicted upon Alaina's own daughter, the very child they claimed to fight for, the little girl, now robbed of her grandmother's boundless love and subjected to the profound absence of her mother, became yet another innocent victim in this tragic saga. Melissa, now shouldering the immense burden of raising the child, recounted the heart-wrenching conversations. I had to tell her, well, baby, Grandma still loves you, but she can't come see you. And then the unavoidable, deeply painful question from a child longing for her mother. Why isn't my mommy coming to pick me up? These words, emanating from an innocent mouth, underscored the ripple effects of betrayal, the enduring, agonizing legacy of a mother's unspeakable act. Epilogue, echoes of justice, lessons in humanity. The narrative of Lynn Mercer's murder and the subsequent pursuit of justice for Alaina Mercer and Christina Brown is more than just a case study in criminal psychology. It is a profound humanistic text. It stands as a stark reminder that even in seemingly peaceful communities, the insidious currents of resentment, addiction, and dysfunctional relationships can erupt with devastating consequences. Lynn Mercer, a woman defined by her boundless empathy and selflessness, ultimately became a victim of the very love she so freely bestowed. Her desire to nurture, to rescue Christina from a difficult past, and to unconditionally support her troubled daughter, Alaina, was not a weakness, but a testament to a beautiful, open heart. Yet, it also illuminates a painful lesson that one's deepest virtues can, in the face of predatory and manipulative individuals, become points of tragic vulnerability. Lynn's story, while ending in tragedy, remains an enduring monument to maternal love and unwavering compassion. It calls upon us to recognize the dangerous allure of manipulation, particularly when directed at those who harbor immense generosity. The efforts of the Spotsylvania County Sheriff's Office, from the diligent deputy responding to a welfare check to the meticulous investigators piecing together fragmented clues, underscore the dedication inherent in law enforcement. Their patience in deciphering Christina's unsettling smirk, their tactical brilliance in utilizing the polygraph to fracture an alibi, and their relentless pursuit of every lead, culminating in the fortuitous Crime Stoppers. Tip, demonstrate the blend of science, intuition, and sheer perseverance required to navigate the labyrinthine paths of criminal investigation. The red, on a shell casing, and seemingly insignificant detail, became the crucial thread that unraveled a carefully concealed murder plot, inspiring faith in the meticulous nature of justice. This case champions the triumph of methodical detective work over deceit, reassuring communities that even the most complex webs of lies can be untangled. From a psychological perspective, Alaina and Christina's trajectory offers chilling insights into the destructive power of codependency, addiction, and profound narcissism. Alaina's lifelong struggle with bipolar disorder, while deserving of empathy and proper care, was tragically unaddressed in its behavioral manifestations. Her ability to pull at her mother's heartstrings evolved into a sophisticated, yet self-serving, form of manipulation. Christina's difficult upbringing and alleged criminal past contributed to a hardened, opportunistic persona, finding in Alaina a partner in both illicit activities and a shared, distorted reality. Their dynamic, characterized by a dominant-submissive interplay, allowed both to feed off each other's vulnerabilities and amplify their worst impulses. The dueling confessions, each attempting to shift blame entirely to the other, exemplify the profound self-preservation instinct in criminals and a remarkable lack of genuine remorse. The gentle satire here, if it could be found, is in their clumsy attempts to escape, their frantic hiding underneath the bed, and their transparent finger-pointing, behaviors utterly devoid of the calculated cunning they imagined themselves to possess. They were, in the end, amateurs in the grim theater of professional crime. The courtroom drama, culminating in the plea deal and the victim impact statements, brought a necessary, if agonizing, closure for family. The voices of Bob, Melissa, and Alaina Mercer, raw with grief and indignation, served as the human conscience of the proceedings. Their unwavering demand for justice, even for a daughter, illustrated the painful but vital distinction between unconditional love and the uncompromising necessity of legal accountability. Alaina's final defiant act of blaming her family in the courtroom, horrifying to all present, served only to underscore her continued detachment from reality and her deep-seated refusal to confront her own monstrous deeds. The judge's decisive 60-year sentence, reflecting the gravity of their first-degree murder accessory before the fact charges, ensured that good, in the end, prevailed over profound evil they had perpetrated. The ultimate tragedy, the enduring scar of this case, rests with Lynn's granddaughter, an innocent life caught in the devastating wake of adult choices, forever marked by the absence of a loving grandmother and a mother whose actions stole not only a life, but also her own freedom and maternal rights. The questions, "Grandma still loves you, but she can't come see you," and "Why isn't my mommy come pick me up?" will echo through that child's life, a poignant reminder of the enduring ripple effects of violent crime. This chronicle, while recounting a dark chapter, is ultimately a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of profound adversity, the unwavering pursuit of justice by dedicated professionals, and the enduring human need to confront and understand the shadows within our midst. It teaches us about the fragility of peace, the complexity of family dynamics, and the indispensable importance of accountability. Lynn Mercer's story, while heartbreaking, offers a powerful, enduring message that while love may forgive, justice must always prevail. The human heart, in its purest, most effusive form, often extends outward in acts of selfless generosity, particularly within the sacred bonds of family. Lynn Mercer possessed such a heart, a vast, accommodating space brimming with a love that transcended conventional boundaries. Embracing her kin with an unwavering devotion, she was, as the testimony would later reveal and as her daily life exemplified, a woman of formidable character yet tender spirit, a dedicated registered nurse whose profound compassion in the sterile, often emotionally challenging corridors of Washington Hospital Center mirrored her boundless care. Within the warm, vibrant embrace of her home, it was in this latter sphere, among her 6 beloved children and their ever-expanding orbits of friends, partners, and ultimately grandchildren, that Lynn's true essence shone most brightly, acting as the very gravitational force that held her diverse family constellation together. Alaina, one of Lynn's 6 children, occupied a particularly poignant and complex place within her mother's affections. Her arrival into the world was precisely 9 months to the day after her father, a military man of disciplined bearing and global commitments, had returned from a deployment a symbolic timing that spoke to the cycles of service and reunion that defined early Mercer family life. Alaina entered a bustling household that already celebrated two older siblings from Lynn's first marriage, their presence contributing to an already rich and dynamic family environment. The rhythm of family life for the Mercers was one of constant motion, of shared responsibilities, of collective support, and of an enduring, palpable affection. Melissa, Alaina's half-sister and an elder sibling, fondly recounted these formative years with a warmth that, even in retrospect, carried a touch of wistful nostalgia. She recalled the quiet intimacy of tending to their younger siblings' hair, transforming what might have been mundane, everyday tasks into playful, cherished games. The memory of her brother and herself engaging with the younger children, helping them, playing with them, was an enduring testament to the supportive and collaborative environment Lynn painstakingly cultivated. It painted a vivid picture of a bustling, loving American family, the kind of familial unit that forms the very bedrock of a peaceful community, making the dark, malevolent currents that would eventually rise to the surface of their lives all the more shocking, all the more tragic in their shattering impact. Lynn's professional life was as steadfast and unwavering as her personal one. For many years, she anchored herself at Washington Hospital Center, her tenure there a compelling testament to her unwavering dedication, her profound expertise, and her consistent professionalism. She was not merely a colleague in the demanding field of nursing. She transcended that role to become a true mentor, a pillar of wisdom upon whom other nurses frequently leaned for counsel, for advice, and for answers to the complex, often challenging questions that arose in their demanding profession. This innate capacity for nurture, this deeply ingrained instinct to care and to heal, extended seamlessly beyond the boundaries of bloodlines, a trait that would paradoxically, tragically, pave the way for a chain of events steeped in sorrow. Her expansive, all-encompassing heart found another deserving recipient in Christina, Alaina's girlfriend. Christina's personal backstory, one slowly unveiled through investigation and testimony, hinted at a stark contrast to Alaina's relatively cushioned upbringing, a life often buffeted by the tumultuous winds of instability and the heartbreaking absence of a stable, consistent home environment. Christina, as the narrative would emphasize, had a kind of difficult upbringing. The quiet brevity of that statement masked a multitude of challenges, privations, and emotional trials. She existed in a state of flux, wasn't living in a stable home, and therefore lacked the foundational, unwavering support that most young girls are fortunate enough to experience as immutable birthright. In fact, it was tragically clear that most of the formative support Christina received in her youth did not originate from familial warmth or encouragement. Instead, it came from the institutional structures designed to assist vulnerable youth. Christina had been placed in foster care several times in the District of Columbia, a profoundly unsettling, often traumatizing experience that leaves indelible marks on a young psyche, fostering a persistent sense of insecurity and, at times, a hardening, almost defiant resilience. Lynn, being that singular nurturer, that ever-present caretaker, with a heart unburdened by judgment and overflowing with compassion, saw in Christina not just her daughter's partner, but a vulnerable soul in desperate need of solace and security. Without a moment of hesitation, she extended an open invitation for Christina to find shelter, stability, and familial warmth under her own roof, offering not just a place to stay, but a sanctuary, a haven from the harsh realities that had defined much of Christina's young life. But herein lay the profound, agonizing question, one that would echo with the terrible clarity of hindsight. Was this expansive generosity, this instinct to shelter the vulnerable and heal the broken, a perilous misjudgment? A fatal misstep that, in an agonizing twist of fate, would tragically cost Lynn Mercer her very life? The grim reality would soon assert itself, painting a chilling portrait of violence and betrayal. Lynn Mercer, the gentle nurse, the loving mother, the compassionate mentor, the very pillar of her community, was found shot. The revelation would send immediate shockwaves through her family and community, swiftly twisting initial suspicions toward Christina. Her unsettling composure during the immediate aftermath, described by an observer with disturbing clarity as possessing almost a smirk on her face while surrounded by investigators, only served to intensify the scrutiny, casting an ominous shadow over her. Yet, as with all complex human dramas, appearances, especially under duress, can be deeply deceptive or, alternatively, starkly revealing. Did that unsettling facial expression unequivocally brand her as a killer, or did Alaina, Lynn's own daughter, the child of her deepest affection, harbor a darker, more intricate, and ultimately more sinister secret, one shrouded in the tumultuous, often terrifying history of her own deeply troubled past? The threads of Alaina's personal struggles, specifically her description of a really bad fit and repeated periods of institutional commitment, suggested profoundly fragile and volatile psyche, one Lynn had tirelessly striven to mend, to heal, to uplift with the best care that she could, battling both the illness and the bureaucratic maze of insurance. This profound maternal devotion, this relentless, never-ending pursuit of her daughter's well-being, now loomed large, a poignant backdrop against which the most agonizing question of all would unfold. Could a mother's fierce, unconditional love ultimately lead to an unspeakable, horrifying betrayal, meticulously orchestrated by the very child she had dedicated her life to protect? The raw, gut-wrenching admission from a family member, whispered with an ache that transcended mere words. I didn't want to believe it, but it was true, served as a chilling, heartbreaking harbinger of a revelation of heart-shattering, soul-crushing proportions. Chapter 1. The Quiet Night Shattered in Spotsylvania. Spotsylvania County, Virginia. The very name evokes images of deep historical reverence, particularly given its proximity to the battlefields of the Civil War, its pastoral beauty unfurling in gentle undulations, and the quiet dignity of a well-established, largely tranquil community, geographically positioned almost precisely halfway between the monumental grandeur of Richmond, the Commonwealth's capital, and the vibrant, ceaseless pulse of the nation's capital, Washington.